106 miles to Chicago. We got a full tank of gas, half a pack of cigarettes. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses. Hit it.
Greetings, citizens of the internet, or whatever the hell this is. My name is Lori Lightfoot, and I have commandeered this channel to let you know that I completely disapprove of the content that is on this platform. And I hope that you agree with me, so that if you do, make sure that you are not supporting this channel by going to patreon.com/Chicago Corner. Whatever you do, avoid this channel's Patreon at all costs. My re-election is counting on you, and I hope that if we can all do things that are... I'm losing my train of thought, and I have no idea why the hell I'm still on this broadcast.
My God, you have no idea how much I had to click the buttons here to regain control of our broadcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for another edition of Chicago Corner. I know that last Friday at the end of the broadcast, my venerable news brother, Mr. Edward Heller, and I informed you all that we would be taking this week off on vacation for the new year.
Yeah, but we wanted to do a rhythm and blues review for all of yous. So without any further ado, or perhaps there is some further ado, we now present some type of review.
We aren't here, everybody. This is pre-recorded, but we wanted to wish you a happy new year. We wanted to wish you a happy new year, and in case you were unable to tune in, our New Year's Eve Day extravaganza, where we hosted 4 hours of panels in collaboration with KRTD Media out in New York. Thanks to Shane, thanks to Jimmy, thanks to Warren, thanks to Case Study QB, thanks to Kira's panel of mental health specialists, and thanks to Sabby Sabs and Daniel and Kit. Across all platforms we were live streaming, we thought tonight that we would bring you what I thought were the two best panels of Saturday afternoon, and that will be Kira's mental health panel and the top 10 news stories of Chicago, as hosted by Kira, Kit, and myself. But we would be remiss not to include our friend over here, Edward Heller, to represent the best of Chicago Corner as we take the rest of this week off.
Well, that's a lot of weight on my shoulders there, Jerry.
To just be here for this intro?
Yes.
Anything you want to say?
And also representing the best. I mean, come on.
Well, we are the best of Chicago. We are the best of Chicago indie news media here.
Oh, okay.
Chicago Corner.
Oh, of indie news media. Okay, yeah. Because I was going to say, like, Al from Al's Beef, he makes a heck of a sandwich.
No, we're the best of Chicago indie news media, covering everything across Chicago within news, politics, culture, corruption, along with all the wonderful Chicagoans that bring out the best of what Chicago's supposed to be. Did you have a good New Year's?
I had a pretty good New Year's. It was quiet, but I guess quiet is good considering, half the time it's like you're hearing a bunch of pops and you aren't sure, are they fireworks? Are they gunshots? Or a little of both?
I just heard some in my neighborhood before we started this pre-recorded greeting, and I was like counting the pops. I was like, if it stopped at 8, then it would have been a handgun. But if it went beyond that, like into 12 or 16, then it was fireworks, and it was fireworks.
Yeah, it's kind of like when you get the flash of the lightning bolt, and then you count the minutes or seconds until the thunder comes.
Yeah. So listen, everybody, we're going to depart now. We're going to continue with our week off that we've well earned, and leave you with these 2 panels, which are about an hour each. So you're going to get 2 hours of programming tonight on Tuesday. We hope that you enjoy the panels. If you missed them on Saturday, we wanted to be able to share with you what we did. And as I said, wish you a happy New Year. So we bid you adieu. We will be back next Monday unless there is some important breaking news that we'll share.
Yeah, as Kira says, see you next Tuesday.
Yeah. This Friday will probably also be some kind of a best of show that I'll compile and have uploaded to the channel. So yeah, we will see. Oh, by the way, speaking of next Tuesday, we will have aldermanic candidate Jim Ascott is going to be joining us for an interview, and we'll have a roundup of news stories. I think this is going to be a slow news week too. That's why we're like, this is probably a good week to take off and rest and focus on our stuff.
But we'll have plenty to talk about, I'm sure, because the campaign for mayor of Chicago keeps rolling on, and there's always going to be new little sound bites and stuff we'll be picking up from the candidates as time goes on. So make sure to keep checking in on our channel. Play every video at least 7 or 8 times in a row. Tell your friends.
Join our Patreon.
Donate to us on Patreon if you feel so inclined as to give us money so that we can do more amazing things like that mayoral candidate forum that Jerry and Kit were out at. That was pretty great coverage there.
There's another mayoral forum coming up towards, I think it's Sunday, January, here I go, like trying to check my notes here. January 15th, there's another mayoral forum happening, Ed, and it will be hosted by the People's Response Network. There is nobody else set up to live stream that.
Oh, well, then
except us.
Except us. Well, I mean, we'll make efforts to try and get out there, but it'll be extremely helpful if we have your support. So patreon.com/Chicago Corner.
I'll be able to confirm that next Tuesday. We're going into a meeting this Wednesday. I'll be having a meeting with them to figure out logistics, and hopefully I will have some good news on us exclusively live streaming their mayoral forum.
Yeah,
so you can get round 2 of questions to the candidates.
Yeah, you can help us to help you make a really good decision on who the next mayor of Chicago will be.
That's right.
And we're going to be trying to follow up on some of the candidates who we gave the Chicago Corner Manifesto to.
That's right.
See if any of them did their homework on that.
So until next Tuesday, the News Brothers bid you all adieu.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. You will stop speaking. You will stop speaking. You're full of crap, and that's the nicest thing that I can say.
All right, Kira, why don't you?
You and me, Jerry. What's going on?
Getting kind of intimate here.
I know. I don't know. Oh, I don't know what to do with myself.
Ooh. I know that we're waiting on some guests in the chat, and why don't you share with our audience until all of our guests are in the chat. I'm sorry, backstage. I know that Jimmy needs to take a quick break over there,
which makes sense. I caught my opportunity when the stream was taken off. I was like, I gotta go to the bathroom, because if I'm going to be on for a couple more hours, I gotta go. But yeah, I did my due diligence though, Jerry, because for those of you who don't know out there, I am with child.
She is. Congratulations.
We got one past the goalie there. And and so I brought all my snacks ahead of time. So when you guys see me like munching on screen, it's because I'm starving. Okay. So please.
doing a 4-hour
Please do
stream
that.
here today, so a lot to. Not easy to like break away from the board if you're producing the segments and hosting at the same time as we are.
No. I don't know. I mean, Jerry, kudos to you because you're running the board for all 4 of these hours, which is kind of a big deal. I'm just here, giving opinions and, letting my hair down. Look at that. I can't believe it hasn't gone up yet.
Yes!
Indeed.
I loaded up. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Jerry, because I was going to go into what you requested of me.
Yeah. Well, I loaded up. I loaded up all of our bells and whistles from Chicago Corner, most of which we're probably not going to use, but they're there in case there's an opportunity to drop them in. But I'm not going to drop them in for your panel because this is a serious subject, and you're going to be covering some serious topics. So why don't you share with our audience what's going to be covered? And we'll wait until Jimmy returns. I see one of your panelists is in the chat, but is there one other panelist we're waiting on?
Yeah, there's going to be Teresa, Carrie, and Jimmy are going to be joining me for this discussion.
So Carrie's not here yet, just so you know. Teresa and Jimmy are backstage.
All right, let me make sure that she's not trying to text me.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, what's going on? And also there's always the hoopla around like Central Time, Eastern Time, so
you text her. I want to respond to the chat. Thank you, Sakwoto. I felt like we got off on a bad foot, and I'm glad we're friends now. I really do appreciate that. Your comment. Thank you for pushing back on the copyright bullshit. People don't understand fair use, and it allows these corporations to abuse us. Absolutely. It happens too much. I'm going through copyright strikes and appealing them on YouTube all the time, and it takes 30 days for the appeal to go through, and it usually gets dropped because whoever's on the other end of the copyright strike either knows it's bullshit or they're not paying attention because it was an algorithm-driven copyright strike to begin with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sucks. I can't. Yay! Thank you. I know. I see all the and then of course I do have to highlight. I think it's Log 66 or Laugh 66 without the H. Miss Kira from HLM, is there a hotter woman on the planet? I don't think so.
No, there's not. Not in Chicago. Kira's got a lot of groupies.
I'll take it.
You know, until Carrie shows up. Carrie is who we're waiting on?
Yeah.
Why don't you tell people about your other secret identity as a mud queen?
Oh yeah. So definitely check out there's stuff online if you want to see Mud Queens of Chicago. Little plug for that organization that I've been a part of since 2009. We are an all-female mud wrestling crew, and we wrestle for charity. We give most of our funding goes to the Chicago Women's Health Center, although we have helped other nonprofits and other organizations raise money as well. We always have an open ear, but it's rock and roll and mud wrestling. And so if you're ever in Chicago and you have an opportunity to see the Mud Queens of Chicago, you don't want to miss it. I am the champion of 2016 and 2017. So I actually own those championship belts. And we're pretty hardcore. You don't like, and it's pretty hilarious.
And your superhero identity is? Your super mud wrestler identity is?
I'm Brownie Bruiser, so I'm a Girl Scout. I'm a little girl. Not sure how the mud wrestling thing will go while pregnant. Yeah, that'll be a little tough, but I'll probably abstain from wrestling for this year, for 2023, unfortunately. Although I'll still be part of the show because there's a lot that goes into putting on those shows. But
you bet your sweet Bippy.
There's a lot that goes into putting on those shows, and so yeah. We had some really great success this past month. Chicago Corner for the first time was able to do some field producing. What that means, we leave our living rooms and actually go out in the field. We went and covered the first mayoral forum at the Copernicus Center here in Chicago. Lori Lightfoot did not attend. I was out there with Kit from Hardlands Media, and we did some interviews with the candidates before the forum. We were the only media organization. I mean,
I don't want to call us a news station because we're mostly commentary, but we were the only ones.
We are a media organization.
But we're media. Yeah. I'd never call myself a journalist. I'm a commentator. I'm a big mouth with a platform here. But it was really cool to be able to like be there beforehand to set up. And you can find our interviews with the candidates for mayor of Chicago over on our Chicago Corner channel on YouTube. Please check it out. We interviewed, I think, 6 of the 8 or 9 candidates. Again, Lightfoot didn't show up. Kit was there with me. But we were the only new media organization that was there before the forum to like ask specific questions to the candidates. Last Friday night before Christmas, we had our first canned food and toy drive at a local movie theater called The Patio. We had fans of the show, viewers of the show come out, donate canned food, and we were live streaming from there. So it's been really fun to be able to get out from behind the camera in our living rooms and go out into the field and do stuff live where we can interact with the candidates or, our viewers, but it does cost a little bit to support. So as much as we're also asking everybody to please contribute to KRTD Media's Patreon, you can also support Chicago Corner at Patreon/Chicago Corner, patreon.com/Chicago Corner. Please make sure to like and subscribe to Chicago Corner. One of the reasons we're here is to hopefully find some new viewers to join our channel, to follow us and subscribe so we can build our audience, as well as share other YouTubers with our audience so that you can find people like Case Study QB or Jimmy or Warren, or in our next panel after mental health here, Fair and Balanced. So I don't want to take any more time away from your panel, Kara. I see Carrie's not yet in the chat. Should we start without her?
Yeah, I guess I don't want to wait too much longer.
Okay.
So I'll introduce our stream and kind of why I wanted to talk about it. I mean, other than obviously it's a really important topic, and that is the topic of trauma and mental health. I'll
bring your panelists in. Just tell me when.
Sure. So it certainly occurred to me, last year and this year that there's just like, I don't know, I guess a lack of clarity in regards to what constitutes trauma, what constitutes mental health, and how we can all go about seeking the help that we need without re-traumatizing ourselves. And also in an environment, if you live in the United States, that doesn't necessarily provide that kind of coverage for us unless you have some sort of health care that you're paying out the nose for to do so. And being that I work with physical trauma, that often actually, things start to unravel inside of my job that, we start to discover emotional, psychological trauma that's creating pain in our bodies. I just thought, hey, if I have an opportunity to talk about whatever it is I want to talk about on a stream, I would really like to talk about trauma and really start to unfold and unravel the mystery that is trauma, and also, what we can do as individuals and as community to, help each other and help ourselves. Not to mention get a deeper understanding of why we are in the position we're in right now, where we have so much sickness, so much like medication, so many more issues than it ever seemed like we did. And there are answers to that. And I think with those answers come a certain level of compassion, understanding, a slowing down of, sort of maybe this preconceived notions that we have around mental illness or mental health and trauma. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation today because it is a really deep one, and it can be a really surprising one. Like Johnny said, yes, emotional trauma is always present after physical trauma. And what I found, like I said, inside of my line of work is that people come in with like mystery chronic pain. I'm the person people often come to if they're having physical pain when they've tried everything, right? And we start to unravel physical tension that is being caused by a massive variety of emotional, psychological issues, as well as past physical traumas. And so I'm super excited to have this conversation.
Let me introduce our guests, Miss Teresa Saunders, welcome to the show. And returning again is Jimmy Sunderland. And I guess we're waiting on Carrie, and I'll bring her in when I see her pop up backstage here.
Yeah, she may be tied up too, because I know that she's also taking care of her mother right now, who is not well.
I hope she didn't get maybe the times wrong, because we're doing the Eastern CST EST as we listed.
Oh, she just texted me. She said, "Oh, the schedule said 1," so I thought, but yeah, it's 1. Okay. It's 1 Eastern noon. So I was going to say the whole time change thing. It can sometimes be a bit of a thing. So I'll just be in communication with Carrie over here as we get started, and stop filibustering, which is, I've gotten really good at doing. So I just want to get us started out, with our guests, by having y'all, briefly introduce yourselves and talk about, what your interest is in this topic, whether it's personal, professional, or otherwise, and where you, like, what context you come from inside of the topic of trauma and mental health. So Teresa, I'd love to start with you.
Okay, that's great. I am an Indigenous elder. I am Blackfoot, Potawatomi, and Wajaji, which is Osage. The English took the French spelling of Wajaji, and we became known as the Osage. I've had my foot in 2 different cultures, and just to give you just a real quick basic difference of how we look at things, religion is very much a part, I think, of all cultures in some way or another. At least they have permeated and have lent some sort of structures and taboos and whatever. So, like in the predominant global culture we have right now, which is a Roman remnant of might makes right. Rome ate the papacy, and then it ate the European monarchies, and from there spread out to colonize the entire earth. Well, indigenous voices really aren't heard because of the maximum victors write the history. Well, in indigenous cultures, we're taught that we're born sacred, we're matriarchal, we're taught that we're the least. Every other creature on the planet can survive without help except humans. So it's our responsibility, to be grateful to the gifts from the mother, and it's our responsibility to help foster life. Now, the Western Abrahamic religion viewpoint is you're born in sin. You have to be saved by this intermediary to God. You don't have a direct access to God through Jesus. And then once you do that, it is your manifest destiny to dominate everything around you, whether it's other people. I mean, if you can, it's the whole, might makes right. So you're born in sin, but once you accept Jesus, then you have the manifest destiny to dominate the world. So you can see there is a completely different modus operandi from those from the indigenous to the Western. And unfortunately, we are so permeated in the Western view of things, people don't have another lens into other paradigms or societies until just recently. And there's a wonderful new book out called The Dawn of Everything by anthropologist and archaeologist David Graeber and David Wingrove, which I think goes hand in hand, because I don't really feel like you can separate the physical from the mental or the spiritual from the emotion. It has to be holistic. So I'm probably going on too much there, but...
No, I think that was perfect, actually. And welcome, Carrie. Basically what I've asked everybody on the panel to do is introduce themselves and let us know what the context that they're coming from inside of this conversation in regards to trauma and mental wellness. So thank you, Teresa. I thought that was wonderfully, perfectly concise, but thorough. Thank you. How about Jimmy? Go ahead and let us know who you are in this conversation as well.
Okay, I'm Jimmy. I'm a content creator, so I guess, my stick in the game for this today is that I was pretty much raised in, I wouldn't say complete poverty, but definitely low income family, single mother, was raised with emotional and physical abuse, which led to dealing with work abuse in the sex/entertainment industry, I guess you would call it, which led to lots of domestic abuse in my lifetime, which has led me to really kind of delve deep into myself, do a lot of shadow work, get into not technically religion, but get into the spirituality of practicing Wicca, and just being raised with the very conservative mom, very patriarchal religious ways. I had to find something that was complete different, a more female leaning deity hierarchy that could give me more of what I felt like I needed and what I lacked in, with the whole patriarchal ideology stuff. So that's pretty much what's helped me, is practicing Wicca, diving really, really deep into shadow work, and moving out into the nature really definitely helped a lot too. So, and that's my stick.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Jimmy, for being on this panel with us.
Yeah.
And then I'm super excited to introduce Miss Carrie Drapak, who I have owned a company with for 15 years. It's called Comfy Fitness. And I definitely wanted her take on this panel because I find her to be one of the smartest, most insightful people on this topic. Not to oversell you, Carrie, but I think you do a fine job. So you're like, great, thanks. Carrie.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure, especially my brain is not quite functioning. I'm at the end of a pretty nasty cold, so it's operating at like probably about half speed as usual. But as Kira said, I'm Carrie Drapak, co-founder of Comfy Fitness, along with Kira. And the work that I do in the world is I'm a practitioner of embodiment and nervous system regulation, as well as energy medicine. And I came to those things really through my own journey of healing, of both healing physical trauma, of a sort of very profound injury that I had at about 12 years old, that plagued me my whole life, and in the journey of continually seeking out practices that would make a real difference in that, I kind of stumbled into energy medicine, and that's when it's like the whole paradigm shifted, and I was like, whoa, what is this thing that is so easy to access and tap into that I've gone this long in my life not knowing was even a thing? So sort of as Teresa said, like the West is so caught in its own worldview, and I was lucky enough to just have an incredibly just formative experience that changed the lens, that like took that off and said, hey, here's another way of looking at things. And because it was so easy to access for me, and such a profound eye-opening experience, it threw into question everything that I thought I knew, or everything that I was taught reality is, essentially.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining. Jerry, did you want to speak to, anything in regards to, your own context inside of this conversation?
This guy's in the room. No, you know me, Kira. As you've said many times, I clearly have a lot of trauma that I've managed to recover from, but this panel is for you ladies. You have more insight than I do, but I know that I'm going to learn a lot from this also. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Although I do also want to remind everybody, in case you didn't see the private chat, we do have to end at 1:05. There's so much to cover in this topic, so I'll leave it to you ladies to discuss.
Sounds great. So, I want to get flat, on definitions, right? Kind of like start with what comes first. Just getting clear on like what we're talking about when we talk about the world of trauma. I had kind of a funny experience when, putting this panel together, because when I came up with the idea of this panel, it came off as like, hey, I'd like to do a panel regarding trauma. And, and then the folks that were putting together this entire stream labeled it as a mental wellness panel. And I was like, well, that's interesting, because I don't know that I personally know all that much about mental wellness. I do know a lot about, trauma, because I work in the world of the body. And so it got me really curious about, like, this is inside of my own ignorance, and I'll totally admit it. Like, is there a difference between the world of like trauma resolution, for example, and mental wellness or mental health? And how would y'all, and how whoever wants to jump in, right, certainly can, how would y'all differentiate that? Or is there a differentiation between the two topics of mental health versus trauma resolution or trauma?
Well, it seems to me that trauma is the result of the injury itself, and mental health is trying to get to that point to where you can handle it, rationally, in a functional manner. That to me would be the definition, because I've really gotten into Dr. Gabor Mate, and I agree with, he's also an indigenous advocate. And, he talks about how we want to separate mental illness from physical illness, but the brain is a physical organ. And just like you can't separate the emotions from it, we have glands that get triggered by our various emotions, and a lot of stress emotions. The leading disease in our world is hypertension, and his thesis, and I really agree with it, is that the very basis of what we're seeing, this dramatic rise in society, is that it's caused by the toxic society itself. We have an yes.
Can I just interject one thing really quickly? Gabor Mate, is that how his name is pronounced?
As far as I understand, okay. Yes.
I watched some of his videos after you talked about him in our Slack conversations before this panel, and I got to thank you, because I learned so much from those videos, and I would really recommend everybody who's listening. Rick Solis, Gabor Mate is a must read and watch after today's live stream. Make sure to check out Gabor on YouTube. You will learn and feel so much better with a lot of stuff that he shares. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but I did want to emphasize that's a great resource for people.
No, that's fine, and really that's just about all I had to say about trauma.
Awesome. Thanks, Teresa. Anybody else have anything to add on the differentiation of that?
Yeah, I think when it comes to actual professionalism and when it comes to trauma and mental well-being, I think that there's no difference. I think it's the stigma in people's minds, just the way that we've been raised and brought up to think that you can go to you go to a therapist when you need help, but when you're actually dealing with your trauma, it just seems to be something more quiet and dealt with in a dark room by yourself. And I think that's where the differentiation is just in people's heads. But when you look at the professionalism and what therapists and psychologists actually and socialists actually do is dig into that and try to help with that kind of stuff. Just people don't understand or know yet. And with the, it's 2022, I think this year especially, and the last couple of years have really brought out that to people to where they're more open about it. And it is becoming a little bit more accepting. So hopefully maybe the mindset of the people will change in the future.
Right on. And Carrie, did you want to add anything to any of that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the difference between those words of like trauma resolution and mental wellness, it's like, of course they go, hand in hand. It's like you'll come more into full system wellness when you are doing work around trauma resolution. But unfortunately, in our culture, there is a lot of mental wellness or mental health activity that is going on that oftentimes is not actually addressing trauma. So to me, trauma resolution is more of the root, that if you're addressing, if you're sort of in this umbrella and out in the canopy of mental wellness, which is a little bit more spread out, eventually, like if you go down to the roots, like that's going to be, it will be rooted, health is rooted in trauma of various kinds, or movement away from health is rooted in traumas of various kinds. And yeah, I would hope that as a society, we move closer and closer to fully understanding that, and also admitting to and copying to a lot of the things that qualify as trauma that a lot of times we don't want to believe are that way, because it implicates the very society that is offering wellness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I see a lot of people already like in our chat talking about like systemic trauma and basically how our society is inflicting trauma upon us collectively. And I couldn't agree more. In fact, I had heard somebody say not too long ago, trauma begins and ends with the state. And I was like, it took me aback a little bit. And then I was like, when I really thought about it, I was like, well, I think that there's probably some level of truth to that. And so, I guess, one of the things that I wanted to do inside of this panel is talk a little about those systems, the patriarchal systems, white supremacy, capitalism, and how they've contributed to our individual trauma and mental health issues, like I said, on an individual level, and then even as a species. And then, are we in the United States more traumatized than perhaps our European brothers and sisters? So what are your and even personal accounts of how you've been traumatized by these systems? I think people would love to hear, because I think that the more people can relate how the fishbowl that we're swimming in is creating what their experience is, the more compassion we can start to have for ourselves inside of how we're feeling and why we're feeling, and for each other. And I know this is a big bite, so whatever direction you want to come at this is totally helpful.
Well, I think personally that everything is connected. Natives have we say we are all relatives, and really the sacred hoop has 4 colors: black, white, yellow, and red. And this was created before colonization happened, as our spiritual people actually saw on the inside all the different colors of humanity. And these colors represent other things too. So they weren't surprised, despite the stories you hear about, it's shocking to see a person that's white, but they had the knowledge, and they knew that all of us were just one human race. And we've become dominated with a society that wants to elevate a skin color that's determined by latitude and longitude, as we evolved, as being a superior skin color. And there's so much mythology written about it. It was embedded in the scientific journals. They took Africans and people and stuffed them, or had them in displays in museums. And there was a real disconnect in the West between not just themselves and nature, but themselves and different colored peoples. It just is astonishing to me. I'm just gonna stop right there. Let somebody else pick up on that.
Sorry, I lost my earpiece. All right.
Can I mention there's some really fantastic insight and comments from the chat that I'm sharing at the bottom of the screen. So thank you all for participating and sharing some of your thoughts.
And then Carrie, were you about to speak to that?
Yeah, I guess a little bit. It was a very broad.
It's a big question, yeah.
Question, I guess, necessarily. I mean, I guess I'll just speak to the part of like, are Americans any more traumatized than this country or that country or the other country? And I'd say, every area, every geographic area, every culture has its own traumas that it has gone through, has its own abuses, has the different, I guess, the various histories that are still kind of living through the collective nervous system of that culture. And I would say, it's not a question of more or less, but what I do see a lot of European countries doing that I don't see as much in America, or that it's just starting here, is actually like owning their actions and creating art, creating narratives that are a part of owning that history, so that it's visible. Right, because that's one of the things with trauma. It's like until it's made visible, until it comes up to a certain level, it will stay unaddressed. And so that's really what I see in the United States is a very big like a refusal. And and we see this in social media, we see it in mass media. Certain people that are just kicking and screaming all that they can to shove everything back in the closet so that they don't have to look at any of those skeletons. Whereas, and I can't speak for every European nation, but I've had the privilege to do a fair amount of travel. And I just see a lot more ownership of what has happened in the past. And that allows people to basically to move forward and to create something new.
The first step is acknowledgement, right? And I think that goes, that's a part of a 12-step program, but I think that goes with pretty much everything. Until we acknowledge the past and what happened, we can't move on. There needs to be a level of completion. It makes total sense. And I think that we do have a hard time in the United States with that acknowledgement. And you can see it by the way that we legislate. Jimmy, do you have anything to add in that realm?
Yeah, I 100% agree with what Carrie says. I could sit here and speak on my own trauma, my own personal experiences, but that's my own anecdotal experience. So I agree with what Carrie says. It's in my head. It's like I don't feel like any other country who even is better off than us or worse off than us has any different trauma, because everybody's trauma is valid no matter where it is or what it is or how it is. So I could never compare the trauma that goes on in America with the trauma that goes on in another country, because who's to say whose is better? Everybody's is equally valid. So.
But I feel like a lot of our institutions tend to support, like you were talking about, capitalism, white supremacy, our lack of democracy. That's shown in just the gender bias and the fact that there's not true democracy between the sexes. And, basically men are in control of just about of the narrative. And we see a huge superficialization and sexualization of women. And we don't have a lot of healthy role models on how we should be. Look, all our shows are about crime and violence or sex, and even the ones that are so supposed to be like super healthy family, you go into them and those homes are super nice homes. I would say probably 80% of the people don't have homes that look like the homes that you see on TV. So we're constantly getting lies, abuses, and hypocrisy that are coming from all our institutions, whether they're political or religious. When you have all these supposedly religious people following a politician who's known for mistreating women, of cheating as contractors, of, just the corruption is so pervasive, and the tolerance for it is so pervasive. And the lack of democracy goes from how we treat each other gender-wise in our homes to how we treat each other in the workplaces. It's
yeah. You know, some of the stuff that I wanted to also highlight in this conversation is a little bit of what you're speaking to here, Teresa. So thank you again for reminding me, is just like all the little ways in which, you know, we are conditioned to believe we ought to be or life should be. And I do see it a lot in the capitalistic conditioning, you know, for example, from my own life. And I do like personal examples just because I think that they're relatable, because sometimes we use these words like trauma and people think you have to have gone to war to have any sort of trauma, right? And when that's just not necessarily true. You know, just living in the context of capitalism, sexism, you know, all of that can create a certain level of trauma, you know, like little t trauma that, you know, creates a lack of well-being in our minds, emotionally, in our bodies, you know. So, you know, just a personal example for me is looking, you know, since this is a New Year's stream, right? Looking into the year ahead, one of the things that I've committed to doing is living from the context of just being content. Right. And, you know, understanding that like I have everything I need. I have this amazing, incredible life that, you know, that I've gotten to create. And even though I haven't gotten to professionally where I want to go, there's never been this opportunity for me. Well, I never saw one for myself, right? That just said, you could just be satisfied. And what would it be like to just be satisfied instead of constantly going for that next goal and going for that next goal? You know, just to give you all a little bit of context about me, I went to 4 different workshops at the end of last year to plan for 2022. And, you know, it's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And this is going to be, you know, how I do that. And this year, you know, I've gone to none, and I don't plan on going to any. And, you know, what I will be taking on in the new year, instead of setting all of these goals, I'll still have goals, right? But like, and I don't know how. I literally don't know how to come from a context of being satisfied. Like, does that mean that I won't strive anymore? And then who am I? Like, what is my identity if I'm not striving? And then actually I listened to Gabor Mate, Teresa, after you shared his name with us while we were all deciding on like who's going to be on the panel and stuff. And he said some really interesting things about identity. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is all earth shattering stuff to me. To have an identity is to close yourself off from other possibilities. And so all of this time I'd been so proud of this like survivor mentality, identity, this striving, this achieving identity, that in all the while I'd been closing myself off to so many other possibilities. And my discovery in being satisfied, and that was never possible for me before, even though, and I mean, I have an amazing life, you know, is now possible. So, you know, do any of you have anything to speak to in regards to your own personal, like, prison around like what our conditioning has done to us?
No, I absolutely feel what you're saying. Like I'm pretty much in the same kind of boat that you are in right now, where I'm not like I've always been a yes person. I always want to make people happy. I'm such a people pleaser. Like I don't want to let anybody down. So I'll work myself till the death just to make everybody happy at all at once. You know, if I'm last minute, I'm panicking and I'm freaking out. And this year, I called it my villain year this year, but it was just putting up boundaries, just saying no to things, you know, even if it was a joke, like, hey, do you want to do this for me? No, not at all. But that still gives that other person the idea of, okay, of who else can I do it? So I'm just not overloading myself. I think that I think this next year, if I was to have a New Year's resolution for this next year, other than being the foul-mouthed, sarcastic delight that you've all come to love, is to learn to say more no often.
Can I also add to what Jimmy said there? Because in your bio that you sent us before the panel, you referenced being an empath. And I am too. And being an empath is a blessing and a curse. And you spoke specifically and directly to, you do need to figure out boundaries to like keep yourself sane. I love my friends, but I've had a handful that have had enormous mental health issues of their own, that I always go into problem solving mode to try to help. And I realize, as much as, you care about your friends, at a certain point, you can't save the world. Although I know you do, Jimmy.
That's why my name is Jimmy Saves the World.
I didn't realize it as I was going in that direction. But truthfully, you can be there for people, but you have to, like, at a certain point, set your boundaries before you become consumed with the crisis at hand, because empaths have, unfortunately, kind of go there. So if you recognize that, you're overwhelmed as much as you want to be there for the people you love and care about, for your own well-being, you got to kind of step back and assess and say, I'll always be there for them, but I can't do as much as I want, because obviously they're not open to it, and I can't solve all their problems. And that, I think, speaks to what you're talking about with setting boundaries.
I would also like to point out something that, we're talking about mental health. What really the source of it, I think, in contemporary society is the fact that we do have a toxic society. We have mistakenly equated having an advanced civilization with advanced technology, and all we've created is Romans with assault rifles. Instead of, what we need is a value change for survival. In a mere 500 years, this toxic colonizer culture has nearly tanked the planet. And what we've built our lives around industry instead of building industry around people's needs and lives and the planet's needs. And it's got all of us hurrying like little mice on wheels. How much more can I get done? And, we're working. They took 3 or 4 jobs. They're working 12 hours. Aren't they hard workers? And then all the time, since the beginning of Industrial Revolution, they've talked about how it's going to save workers time and we're going to have more time with our families, while they just try to exploit more and more out of us. And I just think people need to start gathering together and take our power back, because at the root of this is, again, corporate control, power in the hands of the few. And I'm going to get off my soapbox now.
I want to quickly acknowledge and thank and also share their comment from Log 66. Thank you for the super chat. We really appreciate that. KRTD appreciates that. We all know a percentage of ostensibly religious people who are not moral at all. I notice some conservative more moral than their parents' generation. Trauma is real. The most important thing in life is empathy. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Spirituality and religion are 2 different things.
Yes. Oh, that's a really important topic that I think speaks to a lot of what we're talking about with mental health also, because we all want to be moral. We all want to do the right thing. But then organized religions have kind of co-opted that to consolidate their influence and their power over things, when, I think that the heart of morality and having a moral compass is more about spirituality than identifying yourself as being a member of a specific tribe. The tribal mentality, this religion's better than that one. Hey, all religions are espousing to doing the right thing, so why is one right and one wrong? It's just different names for the same thing. And if you want to believe it's a deity, great. You don't have to believe in a deity. You don't have to believe in the literal interpretations of religion. You just be spiritual and be in tune with other people, and really, focus on doing that is going to help improve everybody's mental health, right? Take care of each other the way you want to be taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, and actually, you know, all of you have looked to spirituality. It's funny, in your bios, you've all mentioned spirituality and looked to spirituality for healing, you know, and so that is actually something I did want to touch on in this panel. So it was a perfect segue, you know, that might come off as confusing for some, knowing that religion has had a particularly large role in creating trauma over several centuries. So, you know, how did you all use spirituality, and how would you suggest someone steps into that realm without traumatizing or re-traumatizing themselves, in the way that we do know religion and organized religion as we know it has and does? That's up for grabs for anybody.
Well, obviously, religion's become a tool of empire.
Yeah, some of our viewers are commenting on that. Yeah, the control aspect of religion, organized religion.
But I mean, that's what's so great about the youth of today is that a lot of, you know, millennials and the Gen Zers are really starting to realize what this, like, you know, going to church on Sundays and this moral standing of what it means. Like, you know, I went to church, and when I was growing up as a kid, and you know, we were supposed to be known as super moral and stuff. But you know, my mom would smoke a cigarette outside of church really quick in her car and then spray herself down so she didn't smell like cigarettes. Like, you know, in Christianity, like, that's super unmoral, you know. But I've been homeless before, and I've sat and talked to, you know, there's this man out in Venice Beach, or out in Santa Monica Beach, before he passed away, was named the Bubble Man, and he was a homeless dude, and he would just have this huge bubble machine and just spray out free bubbles for kids that came onto the beach. Like, that's moral to me. Like, that's somebody who cares, not you know, somebody like my mom who would, you know, make sure she had to hide her cigarettes so that the rest of the church congregation didn't know that she was a smoker. Like, and judge her. Exactly. So that's where I kind of like, I still at a younger age, I still wanted to believe in some kind of higher being, something that, you know, all these things that were so coincidental and so strange, there was something in charge of that. So that's why I changed to more of the Wiccan side, because I needed more of a female thing than a male thing, because I felt like the male patriarchy type of religion was very, very judgmental, very strict. Women had to be trophy wives, you know, you had to stay a virgin until you were married. Like, it was just a lot of really bad things that, you know, you don't really cope well when you're thrown out into the real world. So I needed something. So that's why I changed to Wicca. But like now I kind of like delved into psychology and found out that actually your mind is a really powerful thing. And so now I'm more of an atheist who believes that like mind over matter can pretty much create anything. Mm-hmm. And that's where I feel like morals could probably be as well. Like, as long as, you know, you're in your head and you can tell yourself that you can be a moral person and you can be a well person, who is this like invisible sky daddy to sit there and tell you that what you're doing is good or bad?
I like Sky Daddy. I'm call him that from now on. And then Carrie, I know that you had something to say on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime anyone is stepping into a discovery of, or an exploration of anything, right? Whether that's an exploration of their body, of their trauma, of different spiritualities, of different beliefs in different cultures, even just going to a new class to explore something different. There's always in every moment we encounter, even every like conversation we have with another person, there is always the ability to just kind of give your power away and give away your own, or not claim the responsibility that you have to yourself for yourself. And I see this a lot as a practitioner. I see people, you know, coming into sessions and they just want, you know, I don't even like using the word healer. Right? Because it's like, no, I'm not doing the healing. I'm not healing you. I am sitting here holding space for and facilitating your process and your own body's unfurling of its wisdom and its innate ability to heal. And so I think a lot of times people turn to these outside systems, these outside beliefs, outside practices, And they do it in such a way where they're just like ready to hand over their responsibility for their selves. And one thing that that a facilitator once said in a class that I was attending, just like to very clearly set up, like, these are the rules of engagement for this, like, the whole cohort of people. She said, do not give me your power, because if you give me your power, I will abuse it. Right? Like, period. Not because she's a bad person, not because she's an abuser, but because that's how it works. You are the only one who can know what is right and best for you. And if you sort of outsource that onto somebody else and expect them to just magically take care of you, like, you're going to end up being abused, because what else will you like, right? You gave up something that was never somebody else's to hold. And so, yeah, that's just kind of where I stand, is this, just like a hard line of everybody taking a certain level, well, not even a certain level, just taking full responsibility and ownership for themselves and what is theirs. And, as Jimmy was talking earlier about boundaries, right? As soon as something in a practice, in a person, a practitioner, a belief doesn't suit you and you get that no, you listen to your no. And you just don't stay engaged with the thing until you feel like, yeah, either you don't stay engaged with it and you never go back to it, or you go back to it in a way in which you have more ability to stay centered in yourself when engaging it. So you know that there isn't that chance of abandoning self that leads to abuse and self-abuse, right? Because in the whole conversation that we have around consent and whatnot and all of these sort of violations, at the end of the day, most of the time when I look at my own actions, when I've wanted to make somebody else, the abuser, I have to look at it and say, oh my gosh, like, I violated my own consent there. I was like, my body, my being, my soul was telling me no. And something in my brain or something in my conditioning, again, the conditioning, that we've all grown up in from our families, from our institutions, from the culture at large, that was running and that was stronger. And it was saying, yes, keep doing this thing, or allow this thing to happen, or go along with this thing, even though every part of my being was saying no. And so for me, yeah, when you're engaging in or stepping into that realm of seeking help from anything outside of oneself, it's just about staying, truly centered in who you are and listening to those cues for what is best for you. And each individual is really the only person that can know that.
Yeah. Jimmy, it seemed like you had something to add, and I'd love to hear Teresa's take on this topic as well, of exploring spirituality.
Go ahead, Teresa. I was going to say, tell that to my 15-year-old daughter, please. I got an unruly teenager.
Well, I was just being reminded about how we need a paradigm change and a different vision. And again, I recommend everybody read or listen to the audio book. That's what I did from my library, The Dawn of Everything. There's actually societies that have had true democracy. And Native Americans, the women had separate but equal power and separate but equal jobs. The head clanswomen actually chose the future leaders to be voted on. And then if they didn't fulfill, if they didn't do what they said they were going to do, they had the power to dethrone them, so to speak. I just kept thinking of how Gabor Mate says that the West is anti-child. And, you look at the traditions in England where the aristocracy sent their children away, almost sort of like the Germans, with their training, their perfect people. And then here, we're the richest nation in history, and we're number one in childhood poverty. And then we separate these immigrant children and stick them in cages, and they're going to have trauma from that for the rest of their lives. We're anti-child, we're anti-weakness. You can't be vulnerable. You hear all the time, oh, I don't want any bleeding hearts or basket cases. And instead of recognizing that people need help, we really stigmatize them and put them down. We seem to prefer a harsher, more authoritarian figures, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and they're beginning to find out now that really successful societies were actually societies that helped each other, not that they just didn't compete. It wasn't, the fittest person won. It was the societies that cooperated and worked together. So anyway, am I making any sense here?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. And there were so many things to touch on this topic, because one of the things I was thinking about stepping into, and actually some people in the chat were pointing to it, is like how technology has traumatized us and separated us largely. And this idea of community and being together is
yes, thank you
right?
for saying that. I mean, isn't that another thing corporations have done? First of all, they've broke up families. They forced us to move all over, so we lost that support group. They broke up communities. They broke up towns. I mean, look at what they've done to rural cities and interurban cities. They're just desolate wastelands, Anyway, I'm sorry.
No, you're great.
I have a grasshopper brain, and it just takes.
Yeah, well, and even inside of taking on this topic, I just, and that's why I sent, sort of some ideas of what we might cover beforehand, because I just knew that this topic is so big. I mean, it's bigger than we can, really do in an hour. Though I think we did an okay job.
Very comprehensive.
We're gonna be wrapping up here soon. So, grasshopper brain is actually perfect at this moment, because what my request now is that, if y'all had just, a thing to leave our listening audience with, like that they can like put in their pocket and walk out of here with, what would that be? What would you, in this world of self-healing, healing, trauma, mental wellness, what would, whether it's advice or just a thought or something that you've learned, it can be anything. What would you want people to walk out of here knowing, like, for sure?
My one thing would be is that the mind is a very, very powerful thing. Very powerful. So that's just it. That's all I got.
Mm-hmm. Like Danny's comment here, knock on your neighbor's door just to introduce yourself as a start. Yeah, that's a strong start in building community and then building wellness, because the loss of community and this isolationist way of being, this fierce independence that we have as a collective, is killing us, everybody. It's killing us. And this like need to be right all of the time. Also, what Teresa pointed to, the lack of vulnerability, I think is also really making us all very sick. And that wasn't my one thing, but I'm going to make that my one thing.
It's a very, very powerful statement to share at the end here.
Yeah. How about for you?
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's always truth. Make truth your guiding light. My spiritual teacher once said, the truth will set you free, but it'll hurt like hell first.
Yeah, it sure does. And then for you, Carrie?
Yeah, I guess it would be to kind of look at, Yeah, look at what is resourcing you, right? Like, where are your true resources coming from? As you were speaking, Kira, about that idea of satisfaction, right? There are things that I have, as my worldview has shifted, I've shifted where I resource from. And I don't necessarily expect it just to come from other people or just to come from, oh, I made enough money to do yada, yada, yada. But there are much larger networks of resource, with people, it's community, but larger than that, it's like even just resourcing from Earth herself and seeing that as this benevolent spirit being that is always has my back, is always ready and welcome to receive me, and is there for me. Resourcing from my ancestors, all of these various larger than myself, larger than individual people sources. And that at the end of the day brings me a lot of satisfaction that makes it easier and easier to step out of or be in, to not be as entrapped in these larger systems of capitalism, of patriot. Like, sure, they're going to exist. I still live in them, but it's easier and easier to just step outside of and find happiness and satisfaction out of them, because what I'm being resourced from is so much larger and benevolent than any of these things could ever be.
Yeah. Beautiful. All right. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me on this panel and making my dreams come true for a panel regarding wellness and trauma and self-healing. Because I think right now, and especially with the world we live in the United States context, right, where we are, everyone for himself, I think it's really important to have these kinds of conversations so that people can find resource for themselves and find ways of taking care of themselves and of each other. So I appreciate you all very much. And thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for hosting.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Kira, that was that was better than I even expected.
Jerry, come on.
No, seriously, I knew it was going to be good. I knew it was going to be good, but it was better than I expected. So great job.
Yeah. It kept me up. That panel, like putting together that panel kept me up at night because I knew it was just such an important topic and such a big topic that again, identity, right? Like I wanted to get it right. And like the stress that comes along with like being who I am and being conditioned to who I am. But beyond that, like just to really have people be in a conversation that is meaningful and that can be helpful in a real way. It was important to me.
Very powerful. Now, moving into our next panel, we are for our viewers who are watching across the country. As if you haven't already surmised by that little bug in the corner, we are Chicago Corner. So we tend to focus our coverage on hyper-local stuff that happens in Chicago. But I think that our next panel, our next discussion is of interest to viewers all across the country because Chicago is one of the major metropolitan areas in the U.S. And a lot of stuff that's going on here, I don't know that it has as much influence on what's happening across the rest of the country, but I certainly think a lot of the issues we're dealing with here are reflected in other cities as well. So before we go on, our next panel is going to be the top 10 news stories that we feel really were of importance here in Chicago. And to that end, I'm going to introduce one of our co-hosts. I do need to announce, sadly, Fair and Balanced will not be joining us. She does have an unexpected emergency that she needs to deal with. We totally miss her. I was looking so forward to having her on. We had a great conversation on the phone last night. Hopefully we'll be able to bring her on to Chicago Corner in the future because she is originally from Chicago, even though she's now working in Washington, D.C. But in the meantime, someone else who's very focused on what happens here in Chicago is our venerable colleague from Hardlands Media, Mr. Kit Cabello.
Cheers and salutations. Happy New Year's Eve to all you wonderful people. We got the wonderful and outstanding, incredible, legendary Kira, who's in the house. There you go. And we got.
Can you turn your microphone down just a little bit? You're overmodulating. I don't know if you can do that, but you're coming through really loud.
Oh, really? Hold on.
You're coming in hot, Kit, as always.
Hot, as always.
All right, better now?
That's much better. Oh, by the way, Kit.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. You will stop speaking. You will stop speaking. You're full of crap, and that's the nicest thing that I can say.
I knew it. I always knew that Lightfoot was going to say that to me, and I was just trying to tell her, hey, look, you look like a leprechaun. Where are my Lucky Charms at? That's all I want to know. I mean, come on, Lightfoot. What's wrong with you?
I'm already here.
Anyways.
Yeah, no, we've got a lot. When we're decided we got an hour to talk about the top 10 Chicago stories, that literally gives us 5 minutes to quickly share as briefly as we can what's happened, and I guess some of our comments on it. So just kind of keep track of the time. We've got to keep our comments short regarding the stories that we are sharing. But one of the major ones that came up that was astounding to me was the fact that the UK Guardian reported on the shocking levels of toxic lead in Chicago's tap water. This story was reported on by the UK Guardian. I didn't see any major news outlets in Chicago carrying this story. And really quickly, tests performed for thousands of Chicago residents found lead, a neurotoxic metal in amounts far exceeding the federal standards. 1 in 20 tap water tests performed for thousands of Chicago residents found lead, a neurotoxic metal, at or above U.S. governmental limits, according to a Guardian analysis of a City of Chicago data trove. And 1/3 had more lead than is permitted in bottled water. Could that be Lori Lightfoot's newly introduced Chicago, which is bottled? Chicago. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? I don't want to block Kit there. I had our executive producer of the show, Oreo, down the corner. Let me get rid of that. Sorry, Kit. I didn't realize.
I finally became Kit Kat, the real
Kit Kat. Yeah, you did. Kit Kat for real. So your thoughts? I mean, these are the stories that we've covered this past year on Chicago Corner, which I hope everybody who hasn't already done so will subscribe to on YouTube and also like our videos and learn everything you could ever want to know about Chicago in the coverage we do Tuesdays and Fridays on YouTube and Rockfin.
Well, here's the thing I want to share with the audience. Look, we have been covering lead in our drinking water since Hard Lens Media got started on the radio, when Kira was with us at the very beginning, Lainey as well. Jerry, we even let you in on this as well. And the thing is, just later this year, sometime like around October, myself, Daniel Lupker, Connor Dorr, we did a short documentary video about the pollution that's happening in Lake Michigan. It comes no surprise to me that there's also an ongoing lead crisis in Chicago. So the issues that impacting Flint, Michigan are also impacting us predominantly, not just only on the south and west side, but it's also on the north side. So to my fellow Chicagoans, Rahm Emanuel turned a blind eye to this. Lightfoot has turned a blind eye to this. And what I want to say to the future mayoral candidates, potentially one of them could be the new mayor, what are you prepared to do, and what are you going to do to finally bring in safe, clean drinking water for the constituents and people that have been living in this city for generations? I recently found out that my city is, in my city here, like my great-grandfather was born here in 1890. I've been here for generations. My family's been here for generations. Do the families that have been living here for generations have every right to be exposed to lead? No, we don't. No. We need real leadership. And sadly, we're not seeing that from the media, but only independent media is going to be talking about lead in our drinking water. So,
and of course, Rahm Emanuel, for all of his failure, for all of his disasters here, failed upward and was rewarded with the ambassadorship of Japan. We can only hope and pray that Kaiju takes care of him.
I take responsibility for what happened because it happened on my watch.
Yeah.
Thank you, Godzilla. Thank you.
And I mean, and we've seen this movie before, right? So like saying, are you going to step up? Are you going to step up? There's no political will to step up. There's no reason for politicians to do so. I just want to highlight what Nadia said in the chat. The water being poisoned is a deliberate strategy for water privatization and bottled water sales. So you just got to look at where the money is coming from. And we know that the money comes from the corporations. And so if there's no money inside of providing people with healthy water, and it would actually, cost money, then there's no political will.
Absolutely. Great. Let's move on to our next one. The Chicago Housing Authority in Chicago, they basically shut down public housing in Cabrini Green. They got rid of a lot of public housing. There's a lot of vacant land. A lot of the people that relied on public housing were relocated with an expectation that the Chicago Housing Authority would provide new public housing, more affordable housing. Well, they haven't. What the Chicago Housing Authority has been doing here in Chicago is giving up valuable land while the HUD rubber stamps the deals. Despite being years behind on obligations to build more homes, the city's public housing agency gets permission to sell, lease, and swap its property and gentrifying neighborhoods. One of the major recipients of this great giveaway was the Chicago soccer team, the Chicago Fire, that got all of this CHA land to build a training facility instead of putting up houses. Meanwhile, we have seen reported in the news as of 2020, we have 65,000 people homeless in Chicago, while the Housing Authority is giving away land to corporate interests and cronies that are probably also, laundering that money with donations to a lot of our elected representatives or civic leaders that are making these kind of sweetheart deals available.
Well, again, housing is once again further out of reach of working class citizens. It should come as no surprise that we are witnessing large real estate developers continuing to gentrify all the neighborhoods all across Chicago. And what was happening under Rahm Emanuel is still happening under Lightfoot. I'll never forget reading that Red Eye newspaper in 2018, See Pilsen Before It's Gone. And I thought they were going to talk about the Casa Aslan as well as other historical sites being demolished. But all it was, here, check out these bars before it gets too cold to go out to these bars and restaurants and everything else. Yeah. I remember Daniel.
What a misleading headline.
I know. Because at first I was like, see Pilsen before it's too late. I'm like,
I didn't
oh
see
my
that.
goodness. Yeah, this was in 2018. Daniel and I were going to do a video, or we were recording Tom Treasure doing a Chicago's Not Broke thing. And I was waiting for Daniel to show up. I showed up there like an hour and a half before, we were supposed to start filming. And I saw this Red Eye paper. I'm like, oh my goodness, the media's doing its job. And I was so excited to read it. I was like, oh,
Never mind.
Let me quote from this article. Let me quote from this article too. The deal had been orchestrated by who else? Who else, guys? Who else would orchestrate this kind of a deal?
I don't know. Surprise. I
was going to say Lightfoot, of course, right? Yeah.
Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot, but even her allies knew the optics were bad. Land long set aside for low-income housing would be turned over to a professional soccer team owned by a billionaire, and criticism was intensifying. This also comes to us from ProPublica. Bombarded with questions during a city council committee meeting last month, a local housing official stressed that the deal would be scrutinized by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development before it could proceed. That assurance helped the mayor's allies win approval in the council. Look, not only is Chicago the most segregated city in the country, it's the most corrupt. There's corruption across all cities. We're literally numb to what happens here because we're gaslit all the time. And when you've got 65,000 homeless people across the city of Chicago, as of reports from a 2020 study that hasn't been updated for 2022, soccer teams and enriching their cronies is what the priorities are.
Soccer teams, tennis courts. Don't forget about the tennis courts. A school that's actually not needed when there's another school that's like blocks away that needs funding. All to replace areas that have been promised for decades, and they haven't done anything, guys, to rebuild those areas. But no worries, we're getting tiny houses. We're going to get 18 tiny houses or something like that.
That look like tool sheds in people's backyards.
No, guys, Jerry, Kira, I got to correct you because you both have made horrible false statements about tool sheds and having small homes. That's not what's going to happen. And I have to correct. I'm very disappointed that I have to once again re-educate you two. You will own nothing and be happy. That's what they want. You will own nothing and be happy.
No, sir. No, sir. No, sir. You will stop speaking. You will stop speaking. You're full of crap. And that's the nicest thing that I can say.
Jeez. Oh, boy,
Yeah.
I'll never forget
Yeah,
Lightfoot yelling at me like that. Jeez Louise.
So our next story that we're moving into, I'm not going to play the video because we already had some kind of a nasty copyright issue earlier on another panel. But the next story we wanted to share was the city of Chicago has decided that they're going to encrypt police scanners. So not only, general citizens are no longer able to find out what's going on in their neighborhoods in live time, but reporters can't be on the scene.
Yeah.
But
they can be 30 minutes later, Jerry.
No.
30 minutes later, they can get the information.
30 minutes is enough time for the police to cover shit up. Right?
Yeah, guys, what could, as I like to say on Hardlands Media and on Chicago Corner, as well as a few other, Kira, with our reaction videos, what could possibly go wrong?
Hinky. What does that mean, Vince? Hinky.
Oh, strange.
Weird. Well, why don't you say strange or weird? I mean, hinky, that has no meaning.
We say hinky.
I don't want you guys using words around me that got no meaning.
You guys know the authorities are honest. Come on. We just need to trust the authorities more.
Well, this comes to us from CBS 2 News, all right? Police scanners, and now here's where it's, I think, relevant nationwide. If it's going to happen here, it could potentially happen elsewhere, along with the armed robots that the San Francisco law enforcement police department, or I forgot what authority out in San Francisco wants to start arming robots, and they pulled that back. But you can be guaranteed that's going to be reintroduced, and we're going to be living in OCP world like out of RoboCop. But here's the details on the police scanners. Police scanners are being silenced in Chicago, and while officers say it is for their safety, some say it's actually putting your safety in jeopardy. Because the cops, man, they're always fearing for their lives. You know who doesn't fear for their lives, guys? Firemen, firewomen. Mm-hmm. When they run into burning buildings, they don't abdicate their responsibilities because they fear for their lives as much as cops do, which I think demonstrates who the braver lots are. But as CBS 2 investigator Megan Hickey reported Monday, police scanners help people track crime in their own neighborhoods, help many of us journalists uncover breaking news, and help victim advocates provide crucial on-the-scene services. What is heard on the scanners is critical information broadcast in real time. Each police radio zone is composed of one or two police districts. At least 9 zones have been encrypted as of May of this year. So now residents cannot tune in. The Office of Emergency Management and Communications says the reason for the encryption is to keep first responders safe. But we're learning it is also hurting some of the victims to whom they are responding. Big surprise. Yes, Pastor Donovan Price of Street Pastor Chicago used to have 3 police scanners. He recently gave them all away because now they might as well be paperweights. You try so hard to help, but sometimes you're helping uphill, Price said. Pastor Price's Street Pastors group helps and advocates for victims. I arrive about 20 minutes after shots fired, he said. Work with the families as they arrive at the scene. Street Pastors provides everything from help identifying remains at the morgue to follow-up mental health services. But ever since the city first started encrypting radio channels, Pastor Price has not been able to provide the same level of help. Look, I think that
this is such a crock of shit.
Yeah. Well,
it's covering things up. Basically, it's covering things up for the cops. Go ahead, Kit.
Well, again, let's not forget that the police tried to do something similar to this, as well as our political establishment too here in Chicago, with the murder of Laquan McDonald. Okay, we have to remember that there were a lot of factions that were covering up, from the CPD to the mayor's office. Even good old Ed Burke was worming his way around there because he was trying to blackmail that Burger King. The fact, I'm sorry, again, getting a little bit off topic. The fact you had an alderman.
No, it's related. It's related.
Try and blackmail Burger King. Like, hey, that's a nice chain of restaurants that you got there globally, Burger King. Be a shame if something bad happens. It's like a guppy or either that a catfish trying to pick a fight with a killer whale. It's like, what are you trying to do here, Mr. Ed Burke? What were you trying to do here? Excuse me. It's like that scene when Mr. Burns was mimicking what's it? What was it? He had the story with Al Pacino. Not Al Pacino. Al Capone. The Untouchables. With enthusiasms, and Mr. Burns is trying to beat up one of his employees, and he's like barely even hitting him. He's like, "Sir, what are you doing?" Like that.
So, yeah, Kira, your thoughts?
I mean, I think what I'm going to say is very obvious, right? Which is this is horribly dangerous for anybody who's not a cop. And, and I think that we all know that Chicago cops I can speak to, but, I think we see nationwide cops in general tend to already get away with a lot. And the fact that they're willing to do the things that they do in order to, avoid paperwork or, just, get somebody booked for something or just get to the end of an investigation. This 30-minute lag is horrifically dangerous. I think this is a horrible choice.
We want law enforcement.
We're going to be seeing the repercussions of it, and it's going to be quick.
We want to see law enforcement and first responders safe, but this is not going to change anything. No. Anything at all. I haven't heard any stories related to people ambushing, police on the streets because of something that they've heard on the scanners. This is Lightfoot, more of the same.
And that's the reason they gave, right? Like,
it's going to protect their safety. Yeah. I haven't read any stories where their safety was compromised because of police scanners, especially in regard.
What would protect their safety is community policing. That would protect their safety. This whole how about we have more division, more secrecy, more this lot versus that lot. That's not going to keep anybody safe. This is a really bad idea.
Nadia shares in the live chat, cops want to murder with total impunity, using the proletariat for target practice and blowing people away on whims. We've seen it too much here in Chicago because everybody now has one of these to document what's going on. And it's more prevalent to see the abuse that happens. And by the way, we paid out, I don't remember how many millions I do know how many millions because I think it's in our...
it's in one of the stories. How many millions in
taxpayers paid out $40 million in police settlements in 2022. And they don't...
1 year alone.
In 1 year alone. 1 year alone. After getting $320 million in federal COVID relief funds in 2021. But we'll get to that later. Our next story, here she goes again. Let's make sure to distract people with shiny things.
Again, she is a clown. All right. She's an absolute embarrassment, thin-skinned, and this city will not survive another 4 years under Mayor Lightfoot. Now, for everyone watching on Sabrina's show, on all the other live streams as well, Hardlands Media and Chicago Corner are doing everything we can to cover the 2023 election. And yes, I know a lot of you are burnt out by electoral politics, but this election year is going to be very important for the city. And we're asking everyone in the independent media to please, in many ways, if you want to reach out to Chicago Corner and Hardlands Media, we want to talk about these stories. We want to share what's happening here in this city because Lightfoot is a fundamental problem to Chicago. And if she's reelected, it's going to be difficult for us to recover.
Well, let's get into the story. And, anybody who wants to find out how we covered the mayoral forum, Chicago Corner was out there along with Kid and Hardlands several weeks ago covering the candidates who are running. So you can find that on our Chicago Corner YouTube channel.
Most of you live stream too, by the way.
Yeah, we live stream it. So when I think of gambling, I want to go to Las Vegas. I don't want to stay here in Chicago. But obviously, Lightfoot sees the opportunity to pad the pockets of a lot of her cronies and donors with a casino, which is going to basically feed into gambling addiction here in Chicago, as well as create more crime in the neighborhoods that this new Bally's casino is going to go into. Chicago casino approved by city council after screaming match between the mayor and aldermen. The people in this community that the casino is going into don't want it, but she's ramming it down their throats, as she often does with everything. After a heated vote, the $1.7 billion casino planned for the Tribune publishing site now goes to the state's gaming board for final approval. This was reported in May, and it is going through. Bally's plan to build this riverfront casino and resort at the Tribune publishing site in River West was approved by a 41-7 vote. Now it heads to the Illinois Gaming Board for final approval. Now, there were a lot of progressive aldermen that were fighting against this. Unfortunately, it was like the nays, which were the 7, the minority in our Chicago City Council. But, we joke a lot on Chicago Corner. The mayor likes to distract everybody with shiny things. We have the bean in Millennium Park, which Lori wants to, maybe make a double bean, but
a triple bean.
Meanwhile,
Triple bean.
the casino, and then what is she also going to introduce here? Let me pull up this story. For those of you who haven't heard about it, and hopefully you probably did, because I know that we've covered it a lot on Chicago Corner, and Kid also covered it last Monday. We're getting NASCAR in Chicago on streets that were not designed for race cars. I mean, the potholes alone will probably bottom out most of these race cars.
Jerry, if it's gonna make us a buck, we'll fill some potholes, right?
Right.
Well, yeah, but there's also talk about damage of what's going to happen to the parks, all right? And there's no look, Grant Park was specifically designed to be a green space for the people to enjoy. Yes, I understand that there are large financial entities that do want to be here in Chicago and promote themselves, but that area, Grant Park, was for the people to enjoy. It was supposed to be a green space. We don't know what kind of irreversible damage that will be done with so many people attending NASCAR. And plus, this area that they're trying to build doesn't make any sense. It's stupid. It is so stupid.
The residents in that area did not get, nor did the aldermen.
No.
Get any advance notice regarding this. It's just another thing that Lori decided to ram through because it's another shiny object that she can dangle in front of everybody while the city continues to burn. There she is, filing her nails, doing what she wants to do to this NASCAR. It's a disastrous idea, based on safety issues, the impact on the neighborhoods, the impact on the businesses. And of all times that she's decided that this was going to happen, it's going to be during July 4th weekend. July 4th weekend, NASCAR, they're going to tie up all the roads downtown. Interviews with, now, why critics say Lightfoot's NASCAR deal is a wreck. Interview with Chicago City Council members, experts, and a WBZ analysis of the contract show minimal financial benefit to the city and few specifics about who pays for related costs, such as security and cleanup. Race cars zooming through downtown Chicago next July will undoubtedly make Grant Park look like a scene from the next installment of the Fast and the Furious franchise. I'll take it one further. It's going to look like the fucking Road Warrior is what it's going to look like with all the cars crashing and piling up on each other.
So, Jerry, first of all, I want to just say to everyone, and look, I think I owe you an apology here too, Jerry, but can you show up that image of the casino or what it's supposed to look like, the artistic rendition of what Lightfoot wants? Do you have that available or no?
I don't have that graphic available now.
Okay, that's perfectly fine. Well, then I want everyone to imagine this picture because we actually talked about it on a previous Chicago Corner. There's this whole idea of a casino. It's looking nice. Everything looks shiny and sunny, which I have to say that's a horrible rendition of what a casino looks like. What it is, it's dark. There's trash everywhere. There's a guy probably in the corner vomiting, another dude crying because he's lost his kid's college fund, a wife beating up her husband for spending all the life savings. There should be questionable ladies of the evening there, and maybe a dude floating in the river. He's not swimming and he's not alive, but he's in the river floating because that's the kind of stuff you see around a casino.
Yeah,
he's
maybe
not swimming and he's not alive.
Yeah. He's not swimming and he's not alive, but he's in the river face down.
Yeah. It's just, again, it's just another bad idea in the litany of bad ideas that Lightfoot introduces because she's incapable of dealing with the more pressing issues that are impacting people here. She wants to dangle shiny trinkets in front of everybody to distract them from the stuff that she is completely ineffective in dealing with, which, she feels anybody's criticisms are irrelevant.
Well, and to serve her donors, because we definitely heard a lot of donor talk, especially in regards to all of the music festivals and what was the I feel like there was one other story. Was that the story where it's like, she supported Lollapalooza for the next 10 years, and then it was uncovered. Whoa! There was like a $25,000 donation to her campaign.
Yes,
right? So,
and the promoter for Lollapalooza is also the promoter for Lollapalooza is also the one who helped forge this NASCAR deal.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got a lot of nepotism and inbreeding with the deals behind the scenes and who's making bank and who's greasing each other's pockets.
And then to highlight another important point by Danny. that there's a lot of butt cracks on stools in casinos, and I heard that crack kills.
And not to mention, there's that god awful smell of cigarettes, vomit, desperation, and cleaning material too.
Desperation. Now, to be fair, I don't gamble, but I've definitely spent time in Vegas quite a bit, and it's quite fun. But like Jerry said, I think that we're not Vegas, right? Chicago isn't Vegas, and we shouldn't be striving for that. There are so many amazing things about our city.
Are you bastards criticizing my choices of new and interesting revenue streams in the city of Chicago? Your criticisms are irrelevant. I'm the queen, and what I say goes. I don't have to get the approval from the aldermen or the citizens living in the Chicagoland area. I know best.
You know what's interesting too, Jerry, is that I shared with you, and again, we'll see if we can do all of them if we can. But 3 links to 3 different town hall forums that are going to be happening, debates. You know what's interesting is I'm wondering if Lightfoot will attend those too.
She didn't attend the first one. You took pictures of her table. Quickly tell that story to our audience, as brief as you can, because we've got to move on to other stories within the time.
Okay. Real quick. All right. So as the live stream was going on, I went to take a quick break, taking photos of all the campaign tables there, and I saw Lightfoot's team set up, and I was wondering, I guess Lightfoot's coming, and I asked them that, is Lightfoot will she be here? They said no. I said that's very odd that the table's being set up here. Well, as representatives, and these were 2 young college girls that were setting this thing up, I said, well, as representatives for Lightfoot, can you at least give some few questions or answer some few questions about why she's not here? What's going on? They were like, no. And I was like, well, this is very strange and odd. And then one of them quietly said, looking directly at me, this is a very difficult job that we're doing.
I'm sure it is.
And I'm sure it is. I'm so sorry. I hope you guys get all the internship points for that.
Yeah. I mean, what happened to you, Kit, internally when that young woman said that to you?
I'm like, oh no, the beatings will continue till morale improves. That's what I was thinking, like for these young girls, like the beatings will continue till morale improves. Not that I endorse violence, but I'm wondering what kind of verbal abuse Lightfoot's campaign staff is getting to where they set up a table, they can't answer questions. So I'm just thinking that in my head, like, oh, you're probably getting yelled at so much.
You know, we actually have some video, and I don't think we'll have a problem running this since it's a quick news clip, but let me see if I get some audio on this regarding our next story. Can I turn the audio up here? Come on.
I'll go to a local hotel. The migrants, part of a larger group from the Lone Star State, bused to Chicago by Texas Governor Greg Abbott earlier this week. WGN's Julian Cruz is live with details on that. Hi, Julian.
Hey, Micah, 64 migrants, many of them families with young children, taking up residence at this local hotel for the next several weeks or so. We are not revealing the identity due to safety concerns, but we are told that the group is monitored and supported on site by a team of state social workers and staff, but their unannounced arrival last night causing a stir here in Burr Ridge.
So here's what Lightfoot did with the migrants that asshole in Texas, Abbott, decided to bus to Chicago. We're the sanctuary city, right? She welcomed them, then she bused them to Burr Ridge herself. Meanwhile, we reported this week on Chicago Corner the other night on the fact that it is, what is it? The community on the south side, we reported on Woodlawn. In Woodlawn, there's an abandoned school that they've put $2.5 million of renovations into, and they're going to put the migrants there. Now, okay, on one hand, it's a good place that they're putting the migrants somewhere that's been renovated, you know, a solid building, right? But it's on the south side. It's out of sight of everything else that's going on. And it doesn't speak to the fact like, okay, great, you're taking care of the migrants. You got the money to like renovate that school for optics now because the Burr Ridge story looked so bad. Why don't you have the money to renovate these old school buildings or any vacant buildings to help Chicago's homeless population? They're living in tents and under bridges. This is optics. She got caught when she shipped them to Burr Ridge. And now that the heat is on, they decided to put them in this Woodlawn community. Now, the alderman wasn't notified that this was going to happen either. And the residents in the community are not against helping these migrants, but they're like, our resources are stretched too thin as it is. We're not getting the infrastructural financial support from the city. And if you're going to put the migrants in here without, you know, letting us know what's going on so we can do it the right way, it again speaks to her total tone deaf assessment of the situation. So anyway, do you guys want to comment on this?
I do real quick. So here's the thing. I am worried about the safety of these migrants, how they've been used as political pawns.
Yep.
And I cannot forget in 2018 when Daniel and we covered the protests at the Gary Chicago International Airport, where nonviolent migrants are being chained up like animals and have to crawl up the airplanes as they're being deported. These are human beings, and the way that this country is treating migrants who are escaping the war on drugs, coups, civil wars, these actions will come back to haunt us as a nation and as a people, because one day we, the American people, will need help, and there might be a world that will not give a damn that in regards to helping us when we need it.
I'm sure it's only a matter of time until they start using that Gary airport to start shuttling the migrants elsewhere too, Kit.
And by the way, folks, I'll never forget Daniel when we were driving to the Gary Chicago International Airport, because Indiana is my second home. As we were driving there, Daniel was just saying, "Where is this airport?" And it literally it's hiding right out there in the open. You wouldn't expect it. It's just it's one of those things where like, oh, an airport's there. What's it being used for? And then you find out what it's being used for.
And just to speak to some of the conditions that these folks are dealing with, and how poorly they're just being treated now inside of our sanctuary city or whatever. It's been 4 months since the busing began. Mm-hmm. And I just saw reports, 2 weeks ago, of one of them committing suicide. And because the conditions have been so bad, and it's like, okay, I don't know where that person migrated from, but the fact that they were leaving conditions that were, again, I don't know the backstory necessarily of this particular person, but leaving conditions that were so dangerous or so unhealthy or so bad that it was a threat to their lives, to then just come here and commit suicide is a real testament to how much we respect human life.
And probably also caused by a lot of U.S. Imperialist interests in South America, south of our border, everywhere south of our border. Our migrants are coming from destabilized regions that we have a direct responsibility for destabilizing. Sean Moon mentions in the live chat, mass migration is a weapon of class war. The capitalist class requires a reserve army of desperate unemployed to drive down leverage for the entire working class. Let's also not forget to mention that the migrants who come to this country for jobs, they're not taking jobs away from Americans. Okay, they're taking the jobs Americans don't want, that are being offered by the corporations that don't want to pay Americans a fair living wage to work the fields, to work the tough jobs that no one else wants to take. And they work very, very hard at it. So all of this chatter about, we don't want these people coming to this country. You know what? Sorry, I'm probably going to sound bad saying this, but then find a white landscaper, find some white laborers to work your fields and harvest the fruit and cultivate the food that's farmed in California, because that's the workforce that these corporations prey upon because they don't want to pay Americans a fair living wage. And the fact, this is a nation of immigrants, whether they come in legally. I know that we have an issue with illegal, some immigrants coming in and causing problems. The fact that most Americans don't recognize that they're here because their generations before them came here as immigrants. And the fact that we're now demonizing the whole concept of immigration or migrants when this country was founded on diversity just blows my mind. How completely disconnected people are because they think they're going to take our jobs and they're going to cost us all this money that they're not, that they're really not.
And again, with migrant workers, like they're coming here because of our foreign policy in Central and South America. All right. That's what's happening. That's what's going on.
All right. Our next story, which we have.
And just to answer questions in the chat, It is popcorn that I'm munching on. And thank you for those of you who are letting everybody know why I'm munching on a live stream.
That's right. That's right. There's
unprofessional over here. I'm starving.
There's a brand new tiny person on their way.
Bundle is on the way. All right. So this is our story number 6, and we're actually doing pretty good on time. So police misconduct lawsuits in Chicago cost taxpayers $40 million in 2020, report shows, and the costs are growing. That's 1 year. 1 year's worth of police misconduct settlements. Meanwhile, as I mentioned earlier, Lightfoot directed about 70%, which was $280 million worth of federal COVID relief funds to police overtime in 2021. So they're getting the overtime so they can basically violate people's civil rights that we end up paying for with these $40 million worth of lawsuits in 2022. All right. Really quickly, the article says Chicago taxpayers shelled out more than $40 million in 2020 for plaintiffs and their attorneys who alleged misconduct against the Chicago Police Department, according to a report published by the city's law department last week. And early indications show the city's police-related legal costs have only risen since. The Chicago Department of Law's 69-page report on Chicago Police Department 2020 litigation comes as the law department faces a shortage of staff and pressure from the city council to bring more lawsuits to trial, all as the city approaches 2 full years without a chief risk officer to firm up the city's protections from legal exposure. We have come up with a solution on Chicago Corner. We've talked about endlessly 2 solutions that would, I think, stave this off, right? Lawyers and doctors and other professionals are obligated by law to carry liability insurance. Cops need to carry liability insurance. And if they don't want to do that, if their union decides, no, that's unfair. We serve and protect. We don't want to cause any undue expense on them with liability insurance. Great. If you're involved in abuse and it's proven in court, it comes out of your pension, period. One or the other. This cannot continue to go on. And this is not a disrespect to law enforcement. We want law enforcement to live up to the ideals that we're told it represents. Sadly, here in Chicago, more often than less, it doesn't.
I also want to add on here too. Jerry, when you were first starting off with Chicago Corner, I think it was like, again, in 2021 and even going into here now.
Adam Toledo.
Adam Toledo. That's what I was going to get to. We both watched that video before we went live. That was the most, again, one of the many difficult times I've had to sit through a video and watch true brutality and inhumanity happen. There must be accountability. There must be something different. And now more than ever, we need to make sure that our police department is there to help the people. I know maybe I'm sounding too idealistic, and I apologize. That's my idealism kind of gets me, facing the wall sometimes. But I mean, what we have now just doesn't work.
Now, to be fair, and I might face some criticism. Okay, go ahead, Kara.
Oh yeah, and I was just going to add to that, because we do get a lot of differing opinions when it comes to police, especially in our live stream on Chicago Corner from the one and only constitutional conservative. But if you want to take it from the viewpoint of the police, also, it's not working for them either, right? Like, nobody wants to be a cop because why do you think morale is low? Because look at what they're doing and look at the opinion of the community toward the cops, which is, like, in my opinion, completely righteous, right? And so nobody wants to be a cop. Everybody's working overtime. They're being called out to calls that they have no business going to, none at all. You can reallocate those funds to people who are mental health professionals. There are so many calls that are non-lethal, non-violent. If you look at the numbers, a vast minority of the calls call for any sort of violence in any way, right? And so that's something to take into consideration. Not to mention, we're obviously not allocating all of this fucking crazy funding that we're giving police to the police's well-being, right? Because we've had more suicides.
You have mental health issues too. Absolutely.
Mental health issues among the cops.
Yeah.
Right. And so we have traumatized people going out and regulating a public that is largely traumatized as well is just a complete recipe for disaster, which is what we're seeing today.
Now, I was about to mention, to be fair, and I might get some flack for this, but the situation with Adam Toledo that we all witnessed with the police cam, the problem there was that it was a situation that was escalated. It was such a split-second thing that happened as the police officer called out to Toledo, hands up, drop your weapon. Toledo tossed the weapon behind the fence, but in the split second he tossed it behind the fence and raised his arms, the cop shot him. This was a situation that was escalated. I don't think the cops should have pursued him into that alley because there were other people in that alley. And if the cop's going to on an adrenaline rush chasing this kid, and the kid did follow his orders, it was just an absolute tragedy all around. And this cop who shot Toledo didn't have any prior history of, anything that was amiss in his record. So part of me, you know, as objective and fair as I can be, it was like a disaster waiting to happen with the way the cops are generally told to escalate things instead of try to de-escalate. And I think that along with mandating that police live in the neighborhoods that they patrol so that there's a bridge to the community so that the cops are not looking at everybody that they're policing as a potential enemy or somebody that's going to threaten their lives. If they're living in the communities that they police, then you're building a bridge and you don't see that person on the street as a potential threat. You see them as a neighbor, and you're all invested in like making that neighborhood safe. So speaking of crime, this is a horrible story that a lot of people across the country probably are not aware of. Okay. Cause we had a local pop culture icon here in Chicago, a gentleman named Joseph Cromulus. He was known as the Walking Man, and he was cited all the time down in the Loop as a mainstay. I think in River North, Streeterville, this gentleman, James Cromulus, used to just walk the streets with his luscious mane of hair, very well kept, very, very nicely dressed. And some asshole decided that to set him on fire while he was sleeping underneath Trump Tower on Lower Wacker Drive. Now, Cromulus initially survived, despite the fact he had 70% burns across his body. But sadly, he did pass a week ago. So let me quickly read from this story. Walking man Joseph Cromulus dies months after a man set him on fire on the street. Cromulus's death comes almost 7 months after a man set Cromulus on fire, gravely injuring him. Cromulus was known for walking around downtown. That's all he was known for, but he was just this peaceful guy, walked around and people knew him. He'd talk with people. He was like almost kind of like a little bit of a tourist site, right? Somebody that the tourists would cite. Now, he was pronounced dead at 4:08 p.m. last Sunday, this was 2 weeks ago, according to, when was the date on this? December 12th. So back date from there. According to the Cook County Medical Examiner's Office, he was a local legend known for walking many miles during day-long treks around downtown. Cromulus's death comes almost 7 months after a man set Cromulus on fire, gravely injuring him. Early May 25th, Cromulus was sleeping at 401 Lower Wabash Avenue. Guy without a home. One of the many sleeping in tents or under the cover of Lower Wabash. When Joseph Guardia came up to him, poured gasoline on him, premeditated. You don't just like find gasoline somewhere. You are looking for somewhere to cause trouble. Set him on fire, ignited the blaze and ran away, prosecutors have said. The incident was recorded on a security camera. Cromulus was burned on more than 50% of his body. Okay, 50%, still bad. With officials saying they did not expect him to live. He received treatment for months before his death. Guardia admitted to setting the fire, saying he thought he was just burning a pile of blankets. We know otherwise. The security cam shows otherwise.
That's not true.
Officials said Guardia stood over Cromulus for 16 seconds as Cromulus slept, and Cromulus's legs and possibly his face were exposed. Guardia was then charged with attempted murder and arson. It's not immediately clear how those charges could change after Cromulus's death. I know how they could change. It's a homicide. It was a murder, is what it was. Premeditated murder. The reason we wanted to share this story was it speaks to so many levels. I'm going to pass to Kira because actually I think you, in our pre-show emails back and forth, really were able to focus on the impact of his murder as it relates to surveillance, mental health, and how one person can have a huge impact on the community. From my notes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what the story highlights is, you look at the person who premeditated this, whether he had his eyes distinctly set on Cromulus or not, he was certainly out to cause trouble. And what causes that? What causes that level of, I don't know, is it hatred? Is it disgust? And we don't really know, but what I see inside of that is just a real need for some level of healing as a society, as a people, because this was beyond pulling a trigger, right? I think that gunning somebody down, while I couldn't imagine doing it myself, honestly, it feels a lot less personal, right? But setting someone on fire and standing over them for 16 seconds to watch it happen is beyond just like an impersonal kind of a murder.
Are they a sociopath or is it a mental health issue? I mean, it's one or the other, maybe both.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. You know, and you know, I don't know that, you know, I don't know what could have helped this individual before taking that kind of action, but something is seriously wrong with that. And then, you know, one of the things that we spoke to in regards to a recent school shooting was, you know, the surveillance state and how this guy was basically tracked down through surveillance and, you know, how somewhat slow it actually was, considering how much surveillance we actually have and how much quicker that would have been if, say, Cremelis was somebody who had money, who was in the elite class, or, you know, important in that way, right? Quotes for anybody who's just listening, air quotes. You know, so it's just an interesting dichotomy that we see being used with the what's the word I'm looking for? The advancements, the technology that we do have, and how it gets used or doesn't get used effectively based on who's being harmed. And I mean, and you can have like whatever opinion you have on the surveillance state or whatever. It is ultimately what ended up finding this guy.
Yeah. It took a while though, and we were wondering.
It took a while.
We were actually talking on the show. It's like, why is it taking them that long? They know he went into this subway station. There are surveillance cameras in there, and he had to come out somewhere. But you know, with Jussie Smollett, they had they were on the cameras immediately.
That's right. That was the example that you gave. Yeah, that was the example that you gave right away. Yeah, and actually, now that I think of it, because like my memory is coming back about that story, I don't even think it was the surveillance, even though they had all that surveillance footage on him. Wasn't it like a former?
I think
like some sort of
somebody recognized him from the neighborhood from the one surveillance.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And no, actually, I think it was an officer who arrested the individual for a different type of crime earlier on. It's like, oh, I recognize him. That's
So I was even mistaken in that recollection that you know, even though we had all this surveillance on who done it, nothing was done about it. So it's an interesting conversation, is all I'm saying. You know, without saying one thing or the other about how I feel about the surveillance state.
In regards to this, so here's the problem with the surveillance state. So here's the thing. Everything's probably automated and AI. So in order to find this person, it's going to require human input. And the thing is, what we've learned from the CPD and the politicians that run the city is that no one gives a damn. The only reason why that probably things were taking their time to find the suspect was because, one, a homeless person got caught on fire. Who cares? Because that's what happens in this city. And I'm not trying to sound indifferent, but I'm telling you how our politicians and our police department work here in this city. A lot of indifference. The only reason why things were intensified is as people found out, oh, wait, this is somebody who's part of Chicago, who's done a lot of things for Chicago Center. Like, we got to find, okay, now all of a sudden, then the police departments and the politicians started to care. The surveillance state, it's a frightening thing. But the thing is, when it comes time for it to actually do some good, it's got to be pushed to it. It's got to be guilted to do something. And it's not designed that way at all. It's designed just to protect property.
Moving on to number 8. Now, speaking of mental health, and you know how much I love my transitions, thankfully, we've got some new candidates and new older people who are focusing on the mental health crisis in Chicago after this dickhole that we like to call Rahm Fuckface Emanuel closed them during his tenure as mayor. So let me quickly go into the story here. Voters want to reopen cities' closed mental health clinics because they realize this crisis is probably also related to all the crimes and all the people who are out there that've got mental health issues that are untreated, that are, you know, part of the problem. An alderperson says she'll use momentum to revive stalled plan. The referendum question on Tuesday's ballot in 3 wards, now this is from this past November, was non-binding, but alderperson Rosanna Rodriguez Sanchez said the vote will help her revive her stalled plans to help Chicagoans in crisis. this is a good thing. We've got people who are pushing this through who recognize the void that needs to be filled with proper mental health treatment, not just in the mental health clinics, but for everybody. Mental health, as we talked about, as Kira talked about in her panel preceding this, there's like a stigma attached to mental health that shouldn't be there. Everybody needs help. You can tough up, but at a certain point you need help, and you need professional help to guide you. Now, Tuesday's ballot asked Chicagoans in the 6th, 20th, and 33rd wards on the south and northwest sides if the city should reopen all of the closed Chicago Department of Public Health mental health centers so they can support a citywide crisis response program. That program would also dispatch mental health professionals and an EMT to mental health emergency calls instead of police, which has slowly been integrated. At least 92% of voters in each ward voted yes. Thank heavens. According to unofficial results from the Chicago Board of Elections, the referendum questions are advisory. Alderman Rosanna Rodriguez-Sanchez is an outspoken advocate of allocating funds to city-run mental health clinics and creating a network of social workers and medical professionals to answer mental health crisis calls. This is something that should be implemented nationwide in all cities, not just Chicago, and not just because we're talking about it here on Chicago Corner. Kira and Kit, because I know I don't want us to go over too much over time, but we're close to the end of our list. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kira. This is important. You got this.
Like what you have to say is an important. I think this is something that we've all been kind of waiting for with this, this last mayoral election that just never came.
Yeah.
And it just goes back to what I was talking about earlier in regards to lead in our water, that there is no political will to do this, i.e. resources, money. And now what we see happening is the privatization of, these efforts, right? So now it's, turning into, we're like a neoliberal hellscape here, so why wouldn't our community mental health centers also be privatized?
Kit.
First of all, again, we could thank Rahm Emanuel and Lightfoot for continuing on the policy of keeping our mental health facilities shut down, which is the number one reason why Rahm Emanuel should not have any kind of future jobs. And
don't blame me, Cabello. Rahm is the one who closed the clinics. I'm just keeping them closed.
And then we also had another evidence about why we got to get rid of Lightfoot too, because she doesn't care. Look, mental health is going to be a very serious issue with the way the economy and the way everything's right now impacting us all with social media and so much more, lack of economic and educational opportunities. There's going to be a breaking point for a lot of people. And we need to start addressing it now, or America is going to be waking up to a far greater nightmare.
Yeah, especially as it relates to mental health and the impact related to crime. Speaking of crime, Chicago approaching 600 homicides in 2022, but police say killings down over last year.
Yay, we did it.
Yay, we're down.
That was a very convincing yay there, Kit.
Yeah. According to new data from the Chicago Police Department, through the end of October, only 580 people have been killed in the city, guys, per CPD figures. That marks a 16% decline compared with the same period in 2021. The city's deadliest year since the 1990s, and a 13% drop compared with 2020. Now, what's, same shit, different day, business as usual. What it took for suddenly people to start paying attention to this a little more, as we talked about in a prior panel, was the horrific Highland Park parade shooting, which took place in a more affluent north side suburb where, it's predominantly white people live. Okay. Illinois lawmakers hear testimony on assault weapon ban legislation. Family of gun violence victims, pediatricians, gun safety groups, and others who are pushing for the Protect Illinois Communities Act packed a hearing by Illinois lawmakers on Tuesday. This was reported by ABC 7 on, what is the date here? There's no date affiliated with it, but it just, speaks to what we're talking about with the rampant proliferation of guns and assault weapons specifically that gangbangers get their hands on, or maniacs like this kid Crimo up in Highland Park got his hands on when he decided he was going to go to town on July 4th. What's the lemonade from these lemons? Oh, wow. Because it happened up north, suddenly people are maybe paying more attention to the assault weapons ban. I can only hope. I don't know. But this has just got to fucking stop. I've advocated and said a couple times, you want a handgun, you want a shotgun to protect your home, fine. As long as you're licensed as long as you got the background check and as long as you pass mental health checks. And I think ammunition should be regulated. And there's no reason to have an AR-15. That is a weapon of destruction. You want home protection, you want to conceal carry for your own personal security, that's fine. These automatic weapons got to go, period, guys.
Look, as someone who served, AR-15s being a relative of the M16A2, A4, and M4 carbine, those weapons are designed for combat, not hunting or self-defense.
Yeah. Kira.
And I think the most glaring outcome of this story to me was just the amount of money that flowed into this community to help the survivors of this gun violence, and how though that kind of funding is not flooding Chicago South and West Sides when this many and then some
where are the priorities? Where are the priorities? Yeah. All right. So our last story of 2022. I was browsing Reddit groups not too long ago, maybe middle of the year, where I came across this clip, and it has come to light that our very own Kit Cabello has an army of clones, because as I discovered this video and shared
it. It's an accident. The facility's trying to shut it down.
Oh, I said, Kit, what is this video of you in the UK? Were you attending the Queen's funeral or the King's coronation? He said, no, Jerry, that's not me. I've got clones that escaped the... No. That doesn't look like Kit. I don't know who does, and that's what
and runs like it. That's how.
No.
That's what provoked the Clone Cabello saga at Chicago Corner. There's a great video where we went off 20 minutes during a show on that video, and then how it corresponded with a news story we reported on. Some guy broke into a police facility, and I broke in. Was that one of Kit's clones? And we were laughing. We were probably laughing for longer than we were talking about the story. But ladies and gentlemen, you got to visit Chicago Corner. You got to like and subscribe. You got to follow us. If you like the coverage we do and want to learn more about Chicago, please like and subscribe us on Chicago Corner. Go into our backlogged library where you can discover the Cabello clone saga, where you can find our coverage of the Chicago mayoral election and more oncoming field covers that we're going to go out and participate in, as well as our food and toy drive that we had before Christmas, where we're able to get toys and food for our lesser privileged people, neighbors and residents across the city. We want to do more.
Here's the receipt. That's
what
receipt,
it was.
Right?
140. Yeah, 144 pounds of. It wasn't a lot, but it was the thought that counts. I mean, it was a good haul. I think we got a lot of toys. It was a good haul for our first field broadcast. Now, I want to also say we do need to leave the show, because we do have a live performer that is going to be singing and interacting with the Kerberos Media audience. Please, guys, look at that banner below. Support Kerberos Media at Patreon. They put this on today, and YouTube has demonetized them. And if you're so inclined, you can support Chicago Corner on Patreon and Hardlands Media on Patreon. We've got Patreon accounts set up there also. What I'm hoping comes out of this broadcast today is that all of you good people watching across all of the networks, and thanks to Sabby Sabs, we love you too. Thanks to all of our guest panelists who joined us today. We had a great time doing this. We want to be able to entertain you and inform you more over on Chicago Corner. So everybody out there, Happy New Year. I want to adjourn so we can get our next panelists coming in. Kit and Kira, I'm going to remove you from the panel here so I can introduce them. Any parting thoughts for the new year?
Folks, everyone, please be safe. Support all independent media. And for these live stream videos, I know it's a monumental task, but let's get them to 2,023 likes.
Oh, by the way, we are, I think, maybe 10 likes and subscribes away from 1,500 at Chicago Corner. So anybody watching that doesn't know us, help us get to 1,500 for the new year. Kira, love you. Congratulations on the new baby. Kit, love you too, in a different way. Everybody.
I love you too, buddy, in a different way as well.
Thanks, everybody. And remember, if it's happening on the streets, you will hear about it here on Chicago Corner. So make sure to tune in, and have the special New Year's greeting for all of you. Please be safe as you go into the new year.